where we got to, right? I think did you get to class on time? Yeah. Is that going to work okay? Any questions on the reaching, grasping, development stuff before we get into catching? Okay. Okay, so manipulation skills as opposed to ballistic. Remember, the ballistic skills, we're projecting an object. So we could be throwing, we could be kicking, but you're in charge of the object and you're sending the object away. Manipulation skills are more often you're receiving an object or you're holding something. And that's part of the manipulation. So catching's the most common one, and it's very complicated for the brain to organize catching. So throwing is more biomechanically complicated. There's lots of things going on in throwing. But catching is a really tricky skill for the brain to learn, and so we often see very poor levels of catching in people who don't practice it often. So in sport, most of the time when we catch something, we want to do something with it after we've caught it. Unless you're fielding in baseball or softball or cricket, and the idea is to not let the ball hit the floor, and then that's the end of that play. But most of the time when we catch the ball, then we want to do something with it afterwards. We don't just catch it and put it down. We want to throw it, pass it to another teammate, right? Start dribbling with it. So we're going to do something. So we've got the actual catch. In order to catch, I have to intercept an object that is moving. Okay. And then once I've intercepted the object, then I would have to do something. I would have to manipulate the ball to do the next trick, the next skill. So temporally, this is pretty complicated, right, from a timing perspective. Initially, what we see when we go back to our MSU chart or our TGMD and we're looking at the fundamental assessment of catching, we see that children or beginners will have their arms very, very rigid. They're not flexible. They don't try to really go for the ball with their hands. They're going to trap the ball against their chest quite often. And you might see children move their head away as the ball comes towards them. All right? And there's a couple of different reasons why you could see that behavior or see them close their eyes. Sometimes it's fear of the ball. Right? So they're nervous that the ball's going to hit them in the face, and they think that's going to hurt, and so they move their head away. Okay? If they understand that the ball is nice and soft and squishy, and so it's not going to hurt, and you're still seeing this, then it's more likely that what you're seeing is the brain unable to process that information properly yet. Right? So the brain is getting an image through the eyes of this ball coming towards them, but it can't process that quickly enough, and it doesn't know what to do about it, And so the response is to blink or to get out of the way. Right? So the time relationship, how long is it going to take that ball from where it is to here, isn't sorted out yet. That takes a lot of practice. So, we'll see things with the arms. Stage 1, remember, is just standing here waiting for the ball to hit. Stage 2 is a hug. Stage 3 is a scoop. It's not till stage 4 that we really see the hands engaged with the ball. Someone who's quite good at catching, on the other hand, is going to move their hands in the direction of the ball, so they might have their fingers pointed up high, or if they're fielding a ground ball or something coming in lower, they're going to have their hands in the correct kind of area to try and get that ball, so the brain is comprehending where the ball is coming to in relation to their body, right? And when we catch a ball, we give a little bit, the hands relax a little bit, right? We want to absorb that force so the ball doesn't just bounce back out. Okay? And they'll start to be able to move around and anticipate where the ball is going to be if it's not coming directly to them. Right? Remember our reach and grasp that we did. Okay? To catch a ball, I have to intercept the ball, and then I have to time grasping the ball at the right time to catch the ball. Right? So I'm reaching and grasping. So catching is just a complicated version of reaching and grasping. So in catching, things you can manipulate as the teacher or the coach can have quite a big impact. Ball color. The research says ball color makes a big difference. So a blue ball gets caught more often than a white ball. There's a couple of ideas behind that. One is if the background is pale, the blue ball stands out more. So the signal that the brain gets about where the ball is and how fast the ball is moving is clearer than a white ball against a pale background. Right? Another idea is that blue may be the favorite color. Right? So on the playground, I try very hard to have lots of different color balls, because then they're more likely to pay attention because it's the color they're going to pick. And if they're paying attention, then the brain gets the information more cleanly. So if I'm in my gym then, and my gym has a really dark background or a really pale background, I could change the wall color. Maybe they won't let me paint. Right? So if they won't let me paint, what could I do to change the background for the person that's catching the ball? Right? They say, no, we're not going to provide you with paint. Or we just spent several $1,000s varnishing your gym floor, we're not going to let you slot paint all over it. Right? What could you do instead then? Put up a poster. Excellent idea. Right? Put up a poster or put up some sheets of colouring paper. Right? Tape them to the wall, change the wall colour that way maybe. Ball size makes a really big difference. So what we see with catching is that we catch a bigger ball better than we catch a little ball when we're inexperienced. Throwing is the other way around. Right? If you're working with a beginner thrower, you don't want to give them a big ball, you want to give them a smaller ball. Bless you, bless you, bless you. So a smaller ball will elicit better hand action in catching. Right? So if I'm going to catch a big ball, I'm going to do this, and that's not really good technique for catching. We want that. But getting them to intercept that, it's better to start off with something larger and softer and slower. Wants to move slowly to give the brain time to work out where it is, what to do, how to move the hand into the right place. So if we do our observation plan, what page is that on? Have a look for you.
197.
Sorry?
197.
197, thank you. So, the observation plan, right? Remember that we're going to split the skill into components and then try to ask a yes/no question to see a developmental sequence. So if you draw that out, they've got the developmental sequence here, and they only have 3 components for catching, where they have 5 or 6 for throwing. So for catching, they're looking at the arm action, they're looking at the hand action, and they're looking at movement. So we've just got the 3 components. So we have a developmental sequence. And if I put it into an observation plan, it makes it very easy for me to see, because now I just have a yes/no question. Do I see this, yes or no? Okay. So arm action. Do the arms move to adapt to the ball arrival, yes or no? If it's a no, they're going to be a stage 1, 2, or 3 on your MSU chart. But that's step 1 for their arm action on a more comprehensive assessment. So those yes/no questions make it much easier than trying to follow the table, because the table's got too much stuff in it. Okay? So hand action, body action, arm action, right? So this is what step 1 looks like. The arms don't move. Step 2, the arms hug. Step 3, step 4, the arms are giving. Hand action, what are the hands doing? Are they just sitting there? Are they starting to make the shape of the ball? Or are they moving around waiting to catch the ball? So the observation plan gives you a lot more information, remember, than the total body approach. Right? Component approach will give you more info, but then it takes more time to do it. So you've got to think in which situation might it be appropriate to use one or the other type of assessment. Now, because the task and the environmental constraints impact the skill so strongly, that means that if you're assessing the skill, you've got to make sure that you're consistent, right? So here's the thing. We start off with a class of beginners, right? You've got your elementary grade 1 PE class for the first time. And you're going to assess catching, and you know, because you've done your work and you're educated, that catching a bigger, lighter, softer ball is easier, right? So, for the first day, when you want to assess their catching skill, you give them a nice, big, soft ball, slow-mo or something. Right? And you assess everybody in the class, great, got your pre-assessment done. You spend the semester teaching catching, you work on catching, you do a lot of practice at catching, and everybody's getting better. Okay? And you get to your final assessment. And everybody's got pretty good at catching because you've worked hard at it. And in the final assessment, you're like, well, everybody can catch now, so now I'll use a tennis ball instead of a big soft slide mud. Can't do that, because now you're comparing apples and oranges. Right? If you want to be able to say at the end of the semester that this child is better at catching than it was at the beginning of the semester, you would have to run the exact same assessment. Right? So you can't change the ball. We do that because we think, well, they've got better over the semester, so now now they can catch a tennis ball. But now you're not assessing the same thing you assessed at the beginning of the semester when you gave them the big softball. Right? So you've got to be a little bit wary about that when you're running assessment. If we do a product type assessment, right, so the outcome of catching, then we could assess kids by saying, okay, I'm going to throw the ball at you 10 times, how many times do you catch it out of 10? Right? That would be an outcome, a product. Does that tell me anything about their catching skill? Not really, right? So when and where is a product measure appropriate, right? If I'm working with ENMU softball girls and when they drop the ball we lose the game, then yeah, right? But if I'm working with first, second, third grade elementary kids, do I need to know whether they catch the ball, whether they drop the ball or not? What I need to know is what are they doing to try to catch the ball, right? And then I need a process assessment. So one of the more mechanical type assessments. What are they actually doing? What do I see? So always, all through, stick with this constraints idea. Whenever you're thinking about any of this, right? What different types of catching could I do? What would I change to change catching? Right? So if I change the equipment, that's a task constraint. The theory says I should see a different movement pattern. So if I throw a beanbag, I'm going to see them do something different than if I throw them a football. Right? So you can change up and give them more experience at different types of catching. You can't say, oh, well, if they can catch a beanbag, I can put them in a football game and they'll be able to catch a football. It's not the same. It doesn't fly the same, it doesn't feel the same, it doesn't weigh the same. Right? So you will not see the same behavior. They may or may not catch the football. So use the idea of the theory to help you do something more appropriate with that individual that you're working with. What makes some catching harder than others? So the speed of the ball makes a big difference. Someone throws a fast ball at me, I can't catch it. I'm going to drop it. Right? I can just about manage something that's pretty slow and easy. I'm hopeless at catching. Right? Something else to think about, and we haven't done perception yet, but when we talk about visual perception, people who don't have a lot of experience find it harder to track things that are very loopy. It's easier to track things that are quite flat, particularly if you're working with young children, because their depth perception is still developing, and the loopy thing is a bit difficult for them to follow. Right? So you want to keep the ball as flat as you can. So with our kids on the playground, if you're tossing a ball to them, try to keep it relatively flat. Then they've got a better chance of hitting it or catching it than if you chuck it up and make it lofty. So, I have to catch a ball. In order to catch a ball, I have to intercept the ball. Right? So So I have to understand, not cognitively, the brain will work out the flight path of the ball, right? Obviously, cognitively would help. The more I know about it, the better I'll be at it. But if you're working with young kids, you can't really go too much into the flight path of the ball. Right? I've got to put my hand in the right place. Where's the right place? Right? How do I know where the right place to put the hand is? Or the foot, right? If I'm taking a pass and I'm going to kick a ball. So I've got to be able to anticipate where to go. So a lot of the research on catching is also looking at anticipation skills. How good are we at anticipating either what's about to happen or where to go once I've seen what's happening, right? Where to put my hand, where to move to. So a lot of the research looks at anticipatory type abilities. Okay? It's no point me watching the ball and then putting my hand out. Okay? That doesn't work. So I've got to be able to judge where the ball is going to in order to catch or kick it. So ball size, ball speed, ball trajectory, these task and environment constraints can impact how successful we are at intercepting, but it may be a perceptual thing. Okay? If they don't have depth perception, if they don't have very good depth perception, if they've got a vision problem and they don't have corrective lenses of some kind, if you're throwing from the side and their peripheral vision is a bit weak versus their central vision, if they don't understand the skill very well. So, perception action becomes a really important part of understanding catching. Okay? Perception, seeing the ball, okay? Recognizing the ball, understanding what your choice is for doing something with the ball. And we have stable patterns. So if I'm in an environment that is not moving, then I want something stable. I need to pay attention to the invariance, right? So I don't want it to change too much. If it's moving sideways, can I keep it relatively flat? If it's moving sideways and forwards and backwards, that's a lot more tricky. And the visual pattern that's expanding on constricting on the retina. So when you're driving a car and the car in front of you stops, the car looks bigger as you get closer to it. It's one of the ways your brain knows to put the foot on the brake, because what you see is a car getting bigger. Cars don't get bigger, right? Car doesn't stop in the middle of the road and start growing. So as an adult, whether you think about it or not, your brain knows cars don't grow. So if the car is getting bigger, it means you're getting closer to it, right? When you're little, you don't know that. Okay? So when the ball is coming closer and the ball is getting bigger on your retina, your brain has to learn that that means the ball is closer to you than further away, that it's coming towards you. So that makes it quite complicated. What we find with young children and babies is if you sit the baby on the floor and you roll a ball around and play with the ball, that they're better at watching it go side to side than they are at front to back. So initially they're better tracking side to side than forwards backwards, because forwards backwards also involves depth perception. So, let me have a look at this. Here's my eye, right, and here's the ball. So when I look at the ball, I get an angle coming into the retina. And on the retina in your eye, you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of receptors all across the back of the retina. So that allows your brain to, as the ball's moving, right, if the ball's here, then the image that the retina gets is somewhere else. Every time we stimulate a receptor, the brain gets a signal. So that allows the brain to work out that the ball is moving and where it's moving. But it takes practice. It's not going to know that the first time you do it, right? It has to learn. It's a massive learning curve for the brain. Do they move their eyes vertically? There's a lot of new research on where they're looking and what part of the brain is firing given a ball flying towards them, right? And it can get a bit complicated. I don't want it to get too complicated. I just want you to understand that catching is difficult, right? So, you might have 3, 4, 5-year-olds who throw very well. You could have a 5-year-old who throws stage 5 in opposition with some arm swing every time they chuck the ball. Right? That's highly possible. Should they be able to catch a ball? Just about. Right? But they're not going to be anywhere near as good at catching a ball as they are at throwing a ball. Catching takes a little bit longer. It's highly likely that you'll get teenagers in your PE class who don't catch well. Right? Because when do I practice catching? I mean, in everyday life, I might throw the keys, the car keys, to my husband because he's left the house without them. Right? But if he throws the keys at me, I'm letting them land on the floor before I pick them up. I'm not catching them. Right? So when do we catch, really? It's practice. Right? So it's a very difficult skill for your brain to learn. So don't worry too much about the ratio idea. Stick with the fact that we want to start simple. Right? The most complicated version of catching is moving around, catching something small. Right? So that's not where you start. You start, you simplify it. Right? Change the constraints. I don't have to move because I'm going to throw the ball to you. We're not going to throw a tennis ball because it's hard and it's small. We're going to throw a balloon or a slow-mo ball or a beach ball. If they can get good at catching regularly, standing still, then you can start to add some movement in. Right? Don't add the movement in too early, because as soon as you add movement in, the brain has to learn that the different signal on the retina means it's got to go one direction or the other direction. Right? This makes it hugely more complicated. So, Learning to catch then takes heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps of practice. What happens developmentally with catching? And we don't have very much information on what happens with catching with older adults, unfortunately. Partly because the games, the things that we do in our leisure when we're retired, generally aren't catching. They tend to be striking, golf, tennis, bit of soccer maybe. Right? We don't do as much catching stuff in older age as we do with younger adults. So they've not done a lot of research on catching with older adults. We know that as we get older we slow down. Right? So we slow down physically because we start to lose fast twitch muscles. So we're physically actually going to move slower. We also start to see some increase in reaction time. So processing times get a little bit slower. Right? So it's not that I don't understand the ball is there. It's just that it takes my brain a little bit longer to work out the decision it has to make to put my hand in the right place. However, anticipation sometimes is better if they've had a lot of practice at catching games when they were younger. Right? So if someone is throwing a ball and I understand ball flight path and things well enough and I start moving early, I can compensate a little bit for the fact that I'm a bit slower. The problem with a lot of adults is we don't do, most of us don't have very much experience. You guys are not typical, right? Your sports abilities are much more advanced than most people your age. The experiences you have are much broader than most people your age. So when you get to my age, you're going to deal with a lot of friends who don't do a lot of catching. The more you can play with your grandkids, play with your own kids, play with the next door neighbour's kids, better off you be. So, there is research that says if you start practicing catching, you will get better, right? Being old doesn't mean you can't improve at things. It means it's going to be a little bit harder, you have to practice a little bit more, and chances are you're never going to be really great at it. But it'd be fun to play catch in the garden with your grandson. So learn to catch. I won't have a grandson, so I don't need to learn to catch. Okay? Driving a car is also considered a manipulation skill, right? Particularly if you're using a manual. Look at that. I'm even thinking in American now, because I should have done that. That's scary. All right, so what structural constraints might impact how well I can continue to manipulate a car or an airplane? Right? So, arthritis in your hands, declining visual system. So if your retina is getting stiff or the cornea is getting stiff, it's not that you don't know how to catch anymore, it's that the information you start to get in your brain is not as clear. Right? So there's a difference when you're looking at individual constraints and you're looking at catching. What's going on? Is it a visual thing that's happening in the eye? That would be structural. Right? If the muscles are weak or if the cornea is getting cloudy or Something's going on in the structure of the eye. If the problem is perceptual, they're not making the right decision, right? The decision making is going a bit kaput. That would be functional. So you want to start to understand the difference between a structural constraint and a functional constraint. What could you tell them to do if they've got a problem? Maybe not drive at night, or don't use the motorway or the freeway when you go to family. Go on a smaller road that's slower so that you can react in time. So I'm not sure that I totally agree with the statement that manipulation skills set humans apart. We certainly have more advanced manipulation skills than other breathing things on the planet, but we're not the only things on the planet that manipulate tools and objects. So I think that's, for me, that's a little bit overkill, but it's my personal feeling. Remember when we're looking at infants, reaching and grasping, they're going to be two separate skills initially, while the brain works out where the object is, what do I have to do with my hand to pick this object up. By 11 or 12, they can be pretty accomplished. So they can apply, if they're playing Little League, they're going to be pretty good at catching by 11 or 12. We'd like them to be able to catch at something by the time they're 6. And what we think is developmentally, as I said, there's not a lot of research, but what we think is that getting older impacts more your ability to get to the ball on time than it does your understanding of catching the ball. So when you go out to watch the baseball game, right, you can sit there and have a better appreciation when they manage to catch that ball. Because that's very, very skilled. Okay? Today's Wednesday, right? Friday, then we have a review session. Okay? So the review